My name is Catalina, and at 35 years old, I never expected to hear those words from my own mother. I was in the middle of my nursing shift when my phone vibrated with a call from my 10-year-old daughter Lily. Her voice trembled as she told me her key wouldn't work in the door to my parents' house where we lived. She'd been waiting outside for hours in the pouring rain. My stomach dropped as I signed out early and raced to my car. I had no idea that this moment would completely change our lives. I need to share what happened next. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're from and subscribe to hear how I turned this betrayal into my greatest blessing. To understand how we ended up in this impossible situation, I need to take you back a little. I've been a dedicated nurse at Memorial Hospital for 12 years now, working primarily in the pediatric ward. I love my job, even with its long hours and emotional challenges. It's always been Lily and me against the world since her father Marcus walked out when she was only 3 years old. He decided family life was too restricting for his music career aspirations, and one day simply didn't come home. The divorce was quick but painful, and his child support payments were inconsistent at best before stopping completely 4 years ago. I managed on my own for a long time, renting a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were happy in our cozy little home. Lily grew into a bright, curious child with a passion for art and science. I worked extra shifts whenever I could to make sure she had everything she needed for school and the occasional special treat. Our life changed dramatically 2 years ago when rent in our area skyrocketed and I faced unexpected medical bills after a minor car accident. I remember sitting at my kitchen table night after night, trying to make the numbers work, but the math was relentless. I was falling behind, and the stress was overwhelming. That's when my mother Eleanor suggested we move in with my parents. Their 4-bedroom house had plenty of space, and my father Robert was in the early stages of Alzheimer's. She framed it as a win-win situation. Lily and I would have financial stability, and I could help care for my dad when I wasn't working. Families should stick together during hard times, she said, her voice gentle, in a way I hadn't heard in years. Robert would love to spend more time with Lily, and you could save money for your future. It seemed like the perfect solution. I agreed to pay a reasonable amount for rent and contribute to household expenses. We moved into the 2 spare bedrooms upstairs, and initially the arrangement worked well. Lily quickly developed a special bond with her grandfather, sitting patiently with him as he told stories from his youth, or helping him remember the names of birds at the feeder outside the kitchen window. What I didn't fully appreciate at first was how much my mother's controlling tendencies had intensified over the years. As a child, I had always known her to be strict and particular about how things were done in her house, but I thought I understood her expectations. Living under her roof, as an adult, with my own child, proved to be much more complicated. It started with small comments about how I was raising Lily. If I let her stay up 30 minutes past her bedtime on a weekend, my mother would remark about the importance of consistent sleep schedules. If I bought Lily a small toy after a difficult week, Eleanor would lecture me about spoiling children and the value of money. When you were growing up, we never indulged you children with unnecessary things, she would say, conveniently forgetting the many privileges my siblings and I had enjoyed. My brother Thomas and sister Valerie, who both lived nearby with their own families, always took my mother's side. They would nod along with her criticisms during Sunday dinners, occasionally adding their own observations about my parenting choices. Thomas, an accountant, frequently questioned my financial decisions, while Valerie, a high school teacher, had plenty to say about Lily's education and activities. "You know Mom just wants what's best for you," and Valerie would say whenever I expressed frustration, "She's only trying to help." The tension grew steadily over the past 6 months. I had been saving diligently for our own place, putting aside as much as I could from each paycheck. The progress was slower than I wanted, but I was getting closer to having enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a modest apartment. 3 weeks ago, we had a family dinner that felt different. Thomas kept mentioning how his colleague had finally stood on his own feet after going through a divorce, while Valerie talked about one of her students whose single mother had just purchased her first home. Independence is so important, my mother said meaningfully, looking directly at me. Don't you agree, Catalina? I nodded uncomfortably, sensing the message behind her words. I noticed my father watching me with sad eyes, seeming confused by the undercurrent of tension. He had always been my greatest supporter, but as his condition progressed, he became less able to intervene in family disagreements. That night, Lily asked me a question that broke my heart. "Mom, does Grandma wish we didn't live here?" she whispered as I tucked her into bed. "No, sweetie," I lied, stroking her hair. "Grandma loves having us here. She just has her own way of showing it." I promised myself that night that I would double my efforts to find us a new home. I took on extra weekend shifts and started looking at apartment listings more seriously. I was close, so close to having enough saved up, when everything fell apart in a way I never could have imagined. The day started like any other. I woke Lily at 6:30, made her breakfast, and helped her pack her backpack for school. I had an extra shift at the hospital, which meant I would be working until 7 that evening instead of my usual 4 o'clock end time. "Remember to go straight to Grandma's after school," I reminded Lily as I dropped her off. "I made your favorite lasagna yesterday, so it just needs to be heated up for dinner." "I know, Mom," she said, with the slight eye roll that had recently become part of her growing personality. "I'll text you when I get there." I kissed her goodbye and headed to work completely unaware that our lives were about to be upended. The day was busy with a steady stream of patients. I barely had time for lunch, scarfing down a granola bar, between checking on a newborn with jaundice and a teenager recovering from appendix surgery. At 3:15, I expected to receive Lily's usual text, confirming she had arrived safely at her grandparents' house. When 4 o'clock came and went without a message, I sent her a quick text asking if she was home. No response. By 4:30, I was starting to worry. I called the house phone, but no one answered. I called my mother's cell, then my father's, then my siblings. All went straight to voicemail. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach as I tried Lily's phone again. This time she answered, her voice small and frightened. "Mom, I can't get inside," she said, a tremor in her voice. "My key doesn't work anymore." "What do you mean it doesn't work?" I asked, already feeling a chill of foreboding. "I put it in the lock, but it won't turn," Lily explained. "I've been knocking, but nobody answers, even though Grandma's car and Grandpa's car are both in the driveway. I can see the lights on inside." "How long have you been outside, sweetie?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled, despite the panic rising in my chest. "Since school ended. It's raining really hard, Mom. I'm under the porch roof, but it's cold." I checked my watch. School ended at 2:45. It was now nearly 5 o'clock. My 10-year-old daughter had been locked outside in the rain for over 2 hours. "I'm leaving work right now," I told her firmly. "Stay where you are. I'll be there as soon as I can." I quickly explained the situation to my supervisor, who immediately told me to go. The drive that normally took 20 minutes felt excruciatingly long. Traffic was heavy with rush hour congestion, and the rain had developed into a full thunderstorm. I called Lily every few minutes to check on her, each time hearing her voice sound more tired and worried. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, Lily had been outside for almost 5 hours. I found her huddled under the small porch, overhang her clothes, soaked despite her attempts to stay dry. Her school backpack was drenched, her hair plastered to her pale face. When she saw me, she ran into my arms, her body shivering uncontrollably. "Why wouldn't they let me in, Mom?" she asked through chattering teeth. I had no answer. I wrapped my dry jacket around her shoulders and approached the front door. I rang the doorbell repeatedly, then pounded on the door with my fist. "Mom, Dad, it's Catalina." "Open the door," I called out. No response. I tried my key, confirming what Lily had said. It no longer worked in the lock. The realization that this was intentional, not a mistake, hit me like a physical blow. I continued knocking, calling out, even going around to look through windows. Through the living room window, I caught a glimpse of movement. Someone was definitely home. After nearly 10 minutes of persistent knocking, the porch light finally switched on, and the door opened just enough to reveal my mother's face. She looked perfectly composed, as if she were greeting an unexpected delivery person rather than her daughter and granddaughter who had been locked out in a storm. "Mom, what's going on? Why didn't you answer the door for Lily? Why doesn't our key work?" The questions tumbled out as I held my shivering daughter close to my side. Eleanor's expression remained impassive. "We have all decided that you and Lily don't live here anymore," she stated calmly, as if informing me of a change in dinner plans. I stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about? All of our things are inside. This is where we live." "Not anymore," she replied. "Thomas, Valerie, your father and I have discussed it, and we feel it's time you stand on your own feet. You take advantage of family, Catalina. Always have." Beyond my mother's shoulder, I could see my father in his armchair, looking confused and distressed. His eyes met mine briefly before he looked away. Thomas and Valerie stood in the background, arms folded across their chests in a unified front with our mother. "You left a 10-year-old child outside in the rain for 5 hours, I said, my voice trembling, with a mixture of shock and rage. "She could have gotten sick or been hurt." "She could have gone to a neighbor's," my mother replied dismissively, "or called someone else. You need to stop relying on us for everything." "I pay rent," I reminded her. "I buy groceries. I help with Dad's care." "It's not enough," Thomas called from behind her. "You need to learn independence." I looked down at Lily, who was shaking with cold and confusion, then back at my family. In that moment, something broke inside me, but something else hardened. I realized with sudden clarity that arguing would change nothing. These people had made a calculated decision to leave a child outside in dangerous weather to prove a point. "Understood," I said simply. "We'll get our things tomorrow." "We've packed what you need for tonight," my mother said, reaching behind the door to produce a single duffel bag. "You can come back for the rest later this week once you've arranged new accommodations." I took the bag without another word, guided Lily back to my car, and drove away from the only home she had known for the past 2 years. "Where are we going to go, Mom?" Lily asked, her voice small in the dark car. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, wishing I had a better answer. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart. We always do." As we drove through the rain, I fought back tears. Not of sadness, but of a burning, determined anger that would ultimately fuel the biggest transformation of our lives. The Sunset Inn motel sign glowed neon against the dark, rainy night as I pulled into the parking lot. It wasn't where I had imagined we would be sleeping that night, but at $89 it was the cheapest option I could find on short notice. Lily had fallen into an exhausted silence, her earlier tears, giving way to a worrying quietness that concerned me more than her crying. "It's just for tonight, sweetie," I promised, as I helped her out of the car, grabbing the duffel bag my mother had thrust at us. "Tomorrow we'll figure out something better." Once inside the small room, with its faded floral bedspread and humming air conditioner, I finally had a chance to assess Lily's condition. She was burning with fever, her skin alternating between hot flushes and chills. I ran a warm bath to help raise her core temperature and found some children's Tylenol in my purse. As she soaked in the tub, I went through the duffel bag to see what my family had deemed necessary for our first night of homelessness. The contents made my blood boil. A few items of Lily's clothing, most of them too small or out of season. 2 of my work uniforms. A half-empty bottle of shampoo. No toothbrushes. No pajamas. No medications. No school books or supplies. It was as if they had deliberately chosen the least helpful items they could find. After settling Lily into bed, I sat in the bathroom with the door closed, finally allowing myself to cry silently. The betrayal cut deep. These were the people who were supposed to love us unconditionally. Instead, they had orchestrated a cruel eviction that left a child sick and frightened. I called the hospital and explained I wouldn't be able to come in the next day. My supervisor, Jane, was understanding, but I could hear the concern in her voice. Catalina, is everything all right? This isn't like you to call out last minute. Family emergency, I said vaguely. I should be back the day after tomorrow. I couldn't bring myself to share the humiliating truth. Not yet. Throughout the night, I tended to Lily's fever, which spiked to 103 degrees before finally breaking near dawn. I lay beside her on the sagging mattress, watching her fitful sleep and planning our next steps. The rent money I'd already paid my parents for the month was gone. My savings would have to stretch for a security deposit, first month's rent, and now emergency accommodations. When Lily woke late the next morning, the questions began. "Mom, why did Grandma change the locks?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I sat on the edge of the bed trying to find words that would be honest without turning her against her family. "Grandma thinks it's time for us to have our own place," I explained carefully. "But why didn't she tell us before? Why did she leave me outside?" The hurt in her eyes was almost unbearable. "That was wrong of her," I admitted. "Very wrong. And I'm so sorry you went through that." "Does Grandma hate us now?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "No, sweetie. I think Grandma just forgot how to be kind sometimes. People can do hurtful things when they're used to always being in control." After a simple breakfast from the vending machine, I began the urgent search for housing. Every affordable apartment wanted a credit check security deposit, first and last month's rent, and a stable rental history. My credit was decent, but not stellar after years of tight finances. I called every complex in our price range, but nothing was immediately available. My phone pinged with a message from Valerie. "Mom says you can come get more of your things tomorrow between 10 and noon. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they had done. Just a cold, practical message, as if we were distant acquaintances rather than family. I texted back, "Lily is sick with fever from being left in the rain for hours. I'll come when she's better." No response. By afternoon, I discovered something even more disturbing. I called my friend Heather from work, hoping she might know of available rentals, only to have her express surprise that I was moving out so suddenly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Your mother mentioned a few weeks ago that you were planning to get your own place soon. I thought everything was arranged." My stomach clenched. "My mother told you I was moving out. When exactly?" "At the hospital fundraiser. She was very specific that you'd be out by the end of this month. I assumed you knew." The betrayal deepened. My mother had been telling people I was moving out weeks before their ambush. How many others had she told? How long had she been planning this? Calls to other friends and colleagues revealed a similar pattern. My mother had systematically informed everyone in our social circle that I was finally ready to be independent and excited to have my own place. She had created a narrative that made our sudden eviction seem like a planned positive step rather than the cruel act it was. That evening, Lily remembered her science project materials were still at the house. It was due the following week, and she had been working on it for over a month. My volcano model is in Grandpa's workshop, she said, tears welling in her eyes, and all my research is on poster board in my room. We'll get it back, I promised, though I had no idea if that was true. The next day, with Lily's fever finally gone, I swallowed my pride and called my best friend Sophia. We hadn't spoken much lately due to my busy schedule and her recent marriage, but she immediately offered her couch when I explained our situation. You and Lily can stay with us as long as you need, she insisted. Patrick won't mind. I accepted her offer, but specified it would only be for a few days. I couldn't impose on newlyweds indefinitely, but it would give us time to find something more permanent than a motel. When we arrived at her apartment that afternoon, I found myself explaining our situation to more people. Each retelling was humiliating. Each expression of shock and sympathy made me feel smaller. I was a nurse, a responsible mother, a grown woman, and yet here I was essentially homeless. On day 3, I gathered my courage and went to my parents' house during the designated window to retrieve more of our belongings. I brought a detailed list of everything we needed: Lily's school supplies, our important documents, medications, appropriate clothing, and personal items. My mother answered the door with the same composed expression she'd worn during our eviction. She gestured towards several boxes in the entryway. We've packed what you'll need, she said. The rest can wait until you're settled. I need to get specific things, I insisted, trying to step inside. She blocked my path. These boxes are what we're prepared to give you today. Those are our possessions, Mom. By law, you can't keep them. Many of these things were gifts to the household, she replied smoothly. The furniture, for instance, stays, as do any appliances. Lily's science project materials, her school books, our personal documents. She gestured to the boxes again. Take what's here and be grateful, Catalina. This attitude of entitlement is exactly why we needed to take this step. I wanted to push past her to reclaim what was rightfully ours, but I thought of Lily waiting in Sophia's car. Creating a scene would only traumatize her further. Instead, I took the boxes, checking them quickly to find they contained mainly clothes and a few toiletries. No important documents, no school materials, nothing of real value. I'll be back for the rest, I said firmly. We'll see, she replied, closing the door in my face. As I loaded the boxes into Sophia's car, I caught sight of my father watching from an upstairs window. The sadness in his eyes told me he hadn't been part of this decision, despite what my mother claimed. But in his condition, he was powerless to help us. The reality of our situation was becoming clearer by the hour. We had been systematically cut off, not just from our home, but from our possessions, our stability, our support system. And it had been planned for weeks, if not months. That night, after Lily fell asleep on Sophia's couch, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop researching tenant rights and illegal evictions. What my family had done wasn't just cruel, it was against the law. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of power returning. I might have lost my home, but I wasn't going to lose my dignity or my rights. I opened a new document and began drafting a letter. By the end of our first week of displacement, we had moved from Sophia's apartment to another budget motel. Despite her protests, I couldn't continue imposing on her and her husband. The motel was farther from Lily's school, but it was the best I could manage on our dwindling funds. Each morning, I drove Lily to school with reassurances that everything would be fine, then spent my days juggling work shifts and desperate housing searches. Each evening, I returned to our cramped motel room, trying to create some semblance of normalcy as we ate takeout food on beds that weren't our own. Lily had missed 3 days of school already, and her teacher had emailed expressing concern. Without her school materials, she struggled to keep up with assignments. The stress was showing in her behavior. My bright, cheerful daughter had become withdrawn and anxious, jumping at small noises and clinging to me whenever we were together. At the hospital, my work was suffering too. I'd made 2 medication documentation errors in one shift, something that had never happened before. My supervisor, Jane, called me into her office, her expression grave. "Catalina, what's going on? You've always been one of our most reliable nurses." I stared at the floor, shame burning my cheeks. "I'm dealing with some personal issues. Is there anything the hospital can do to help? We value you here, but patient safety has to come first." "I understand," I said, blinking back tears. "It won't happen again." As I left her office, I ran directly into Thomas, who was visiting a colleague in orthopedics. The shock of seeing him made me stop short. "Catalina," he said, his tone oddly formal, "you look tired." "What did you expect?" I replied, keeping my voice low but intense. "We're living in a motel because of what you and Mom did." He glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in the hospital corridor. "It was for your own good. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. By throwing a child out into the rain, by keeping our possessions hostage. How exactly is that helpful?" "You're being dramatic," he said dismissively. "Lily could have gone to a neighbor. And we've offered to give you your things. Selected things. In boxes you packed. That's not the same as allowing us to take what belongs to us." Thomas straightened his tie, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. "Mom says you've been telling people we changed the locks without warning. That's not fair, Catalina. You knew it was time for you to move out." I absolutely did not know that I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "We were evicted without notice. That's illegal, by the way." "Lower your voice," he hissed. "This is your workplace." "Yes, it is. The job I used to support my daughter. The job I nearly lost because of the chaos you all created." His expression hardened. "Maybe if you spent less time blaming others and more time taking responsibility, you wouldn't be in this situation." Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me shaking with anger in the middle of the hallway. That evening, I received a call from my cousin Emily. She sounded concerned. "Catalina, is everything okay with you? And Lily, Aunt Eleanor told everyone at the family dinner last night that you'd moved out after a big fight and were refusing to let anyone know where you are." My hand tightened around the phone. "That's not what happened, Emily. They changed the locks without telling us. They left Lily outside in the rain for hours. We were forced out." There was a long pause. "That's not what she said. She told us you'd been planning to move for weeks, but got angry when they suggested you take Dad's old furniture instead of buying new." The fabricated story was so detailed, so plausible, it made my head spin. My mother was systematically rewriting reality, turning us into the villains of the story. "Emily, I promise you that's not true. We were ambushed." "I don't know what to believe," she admitted. "But if you need anything—" After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bathtub trying to process this new level of manipulation. My mother wasn't just evicting us. She was isolating us, cutting us off from potential support by poisoning family relationships. That night, Lily woke screaming from a nightmare. She'd dreamed she was locked outside in a storm, while everyone she loved watched from the windows, refusing to let her in. I held her close, rocking her back to sleep, fighting my own tears. "It's okay, baby. I'm here. I'll always let you in," I whispered. The next morning brought a new crisis. The check engine light came on in my car, and by afternoon it was making an ominous grinding sound. The mechanic's diagnosis was grim. The transmission was failing. Repairs would cost over $2,000. "Can't drive it more than another day or two before it completely goes," he warned. I thanked him and drove away carefully, panic rising in my chest. Without a car, I couldn't get to work. Lily couldn't get to school. We would be truly trapped. The apartment search was equally discouraging. I'd found a small two-bedroom unit within our budget, but between the application fee, security deposit, and first month's rent, I was short by nearly $800. I called my mother, swallowing my pride, to ask for the rent money I'd already paid for the current month. "That money has already been spent," she said coldly. "Besides, you chose to leave." "Mom, we did not choose to leave. You changed the locks. You threw us out." "That's your interpretation," she replied. "Thomas and Valerie see it differently." "I need that money for a new apartment," I said, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. "Perhaps this will teach you to plan better in the future," she said before hanging up. That evening in the motel bathroom while Lily watched TV, I finally broke down completely. Sitting on the floor with my back against the door, I sobbed silently into a towel. The weight of our situation crashed down on me with suffocating force. I was failing as a mother, failing to provide stability, security, even basic necessities for my child. We were one paycheck away from true homelessness. My car was dying, and my family, the people who should have been our safety net, had become our persecutors. For a brief, dark moment, I considered begging my mother to take us back, to let us return under whatever conditions she demanded. At least Lily would have a roof over her head, a familiar bed to sleep in. But then I thought about what that would teach my daughter. That cruelty wins. That power is more important than love. That she should accept mistreatment from family because the alternative is too frightening. As I emerged from the bathroom, eyes red but tears dried, Lily handed me a piece of paper. On it she had drawn a small, simple house with a tree beside it. 2 stick figures stood in front holding hands. "Our future happy home," she had written, in her careful 10-year-old handwriting. In that moment something shifted inside me. The despair that had been crushing me transformed into a steel-like resolve. My daughter deserved better. We both did. And I was going to make sure we got it. I kissed the top of her head. "It's beautiful, Lily. And you know what? That's exactly what we're going to have." "Promise?" she asked, her eyes wide, with hope and trust. "I promise," I said. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. The next morning I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. While Lily slept, I made a list of everything we needed to do, breaking our seemingly impossible situation into manageable steps. First on the list, legal help. The community legal aid office opened at 8, and I was there when the doors unlocked. The attorney who met with me, Paula Martinez, listened carefully as I explained our situation. Her expression grew increasingly concerned. "What your family did is an illegal eviction," she confirmed. "Changing locks, denying access to your possessions, all without proper notice. The fact that you paid rent establishes a landlord-tenant relationship, even with family." "What can I do?" I asked. "Document everything," she advised. "Every communication, every refusal, every item they're withholding. Take photos if possible. We can prepare a formal demand letter outlining the violations and requesting immediate return of your property and the rent money you're owed." She helped me draft the letter, explaining that while we could potentially file a lawsuit, the demand letter might be enough to prompt action without court involvement. "Most people don't want legal troubles," she explained. "Sometimes just showing that you know your rights and are willing to enforce them is enough." With the letter in progress, I turned to my next task, finding stable housing. I called Lily's school and asked to speak with the counselor, Miss Rivera. After explaining our situation, she immediately offered to connect us with emergency housing assistance. This happens more often than you'd think, she said kindly. There are resources specifically for families in transition. And don't worry about Lily's missed assignments. I'll speak with her teachers. By noon, I had applications for 3 different housing assistance programs and a list of apartments that worked with those programs. Miss Rivera also mentioned a grant that could help replace Lily's school supplies and clothing. The most important thing is keeping her routine as normal as possible, she advised. Children are resilient, but they need stability. My next stop was my bank, where I had been a customer for over 12 years. I had always kept my accounts in good standing, making minimum payments even during the tightest months. The bank manager, Mr. Franklin, reviewed my accounts and nodded thoughtfully. Based on your history with us and your stable employment, I think we can help, he said. We can restructure your accounts to free up some immediate cash, and I can approve a small personal loan to cover your car repairs. The interest rate won't be ideal, but it will get you through this emergency. By the end of our meeting, I had access to enough funds to repair my car and cover the security deposit on a modest apartment. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough to keep us moving forward. As I left the bank, my phone rang. It was Angela, a nurse I often worked with in pediatrics. Catalina, I heard about what happened, she said, without preamble. My mother has an empty in-law suite at her house. It's small, just a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchenette, but it's private and has its own entrance. She says you and Lily can stay there for a month while you figure things out, no charge. The kindness in her offer brought tears to my eyes. Angela, that's so generous, but I couldn't possibly. You would do the same for me, she said firmly. Besides, Mom's been lonely since Dad died. Having someone in the suite will make her feel safer. With lodging secured for the next month, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would give us time to find one without the pressure of daily motel costs draining our resources. The final piece fell into place when I contacted the hospital's employee assistance program, something I should have done days ago but had been too proud to consider. They offered emergency funds counseling services and connections to community resources I hadn't known existed. Your situation qualifies for several types of assistance, the coordinator explained, including therapy services for both you and Lily. I had been so focused on our physical and financial needs that I hadn't fully acknowledged the emotional toll this betrayal was taking, especially on Lily. The thought of professional help for both of us was a relief I hadn't known I needed. That evening, as Lily and I prepared to move from the motel to Angela's mother's house, I sat her down for an honest conversation. Things are going to get better, I promised. We have a nice place to stay for a while, and I'm working on finding us a permanent home. Will we ever go back to Grandma's house? She asked, her voice small. I considered my answer carefully. I don't think so, sweetheart. What Grandma and Uncle Thomas and Aunt Valerie did wasn't okay. It wasn't safe, and it wasn't kind. But what about Grandpa? He didn't do anything wrong. Her insight surprised me. No, he didn't. And we'll find a way to visit him, I promise. But we need to be around people who treat us with respect and love. Like Angela and her mom? Exactly like them. And you know what? There are a lot of people like that in our lives. We just need to recognize who they are. The next day, I took a bold step. While Lily was at school, I drove to my parents' house with the finalized legal letter in hand. This time, I didn't knock or call ahead. I simply taped the sealed envelope to the door, along with a detailed inventory of every item that belonged to us, from Lily's science project materials to our birth certificates and social security cards. As I turned to leave, I noticed Thomas's car pulling into the driveway. He approached with a wary expression. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Delivering some information Mom needs to see," I replied calmly. "If this is some kind of threat?" "It's not a threat, Thomas. It's a statement of facts and legal rights. I'm giving you all a chance to do the right thing before this escalates." His expression flickered with uncertainty. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not going to let you bully us anymore. What you all did was illegal. It endangered a child. It was cruel and calculated, and there are consequences for that." "We were trying to help you become independent," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, you weren't. You were punishing me for some perceived failure to meet Mom's standards. But that ends now. I am independent, Thomas. More than any of you, actually. I've raised my daughter alone, worked full-time, and contributed to this household without complaint. The difference is, I don't use people's vulnerability to control them." His face flushed. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "Mom has always needed to be in control, and you and Valerie have always enabled her, but I'm breaking that cycle for Lily's sake and for mine." As I walked to my car, Thomas called after me, his voice less certain than before. "What's in the letter, Catalina?" "The truth," I replied, without turning around. "Something this family could use a lot more of." That night, as Lily and I settled into the cozy in-law suite, I felt a strange sense of peace despite our circumstances. We had a plan now, we had support, and most importantly, we had each other. Before bed, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I retrieved my old journals from one of the boxes we'd managed to recover. Pages upon pages documented my mother's controlling behavior throughout my childhood and young adulthood. The patterns were clear cycles of manipulation and emotional withdrawal whenever I showed too much independence. These journals weren't just painful memories. They were evidence documentation of a lifetime of similar behavior that validated my current experience. If necessary, they would help me explain to others, perhaps even in court, that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a long-established pattern. As I closed the journal, my phone chimed with a text from my father's private phone, one my mother didn't know he had. The message was brief, but significant. "Your mother got your letter. Things changing here. Stay safe. Love you both." I showed the message to Lily, who was preparing for bed. "See, Grandpa still loves us," I said, hugging her close. "Will things really get better, Mom?" she asked, still uncertain. "They already are," I assured her, and for the first time in days I truly believed it. 3 days after delivering the letter, I received a call from an unknown number while at work. When I answered, I was surprised to hear my father's voice, speaking in the clear, lucid tone that was becoming increasingly rare. "Catalina," he said quietly, "I'm calling from the neighbor's house. Your mother got your letter." "I know, Dad. You texted me, remember?" There was a pause. "Did I? Sorry, sometimes I forget. But I needed to tell you what happened." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping into an empty patient room for privacy. When she opened that letter, she went white as a sheet. I haven't seen Eleanor look like that since her own mother died. She read it 3 times, then locked herself in the bedroom for hours. When she came out, she was different, quiet. Thomas came over and they argued. I couldn't hear everything, but he kept saying they'd gone too far. My heart raced. "Dad, are you okay there? Should I be worried about you?" No, I'm fine. Things are tense, but not dangerous. I just wanted you to know. That letter did something, Catalina. It shifted things." After we hung up, I found myself both hopeful and wary. My mother wasn't one to back down easily, even when confronted with legal consequences. But perhaps the formal nature of the letter, the clear outline of violations and potential penalties, had finally broken through her self-righteousness. I didn't have to wonder long. That afternoon, Thomas appeared at the hospital during my break, looking uncomfortable in the cafeteria as he approached my table. "Can we talk?" he asked, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He sat down, fidgeting with his watch. "That letter you sent, Mom's pretty upset about it." "I imagine she is. She says you're exaggerating what happened, that you're trying to cause trouble. The letter states facts, Thomas. Nothing more, nothing less." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, things got out of hand. We never meant for Lily to be outside for hours. We thought you'd get the message and make other arrangements right away." "What message? That my key suddenly wouldn't work, with no warning, no discussion. Mom said she'd been hinting for weeks that it was time for you to move out." "Hints aren't noticed, Thomas. And even if they were, you don't change locks on a home where a child lives without ensuring they have somewhere else to go." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I know. That part was wrong. We all know that now. And the rest. Keeping our belongings, spreading lies to family and friends, creating a false narrative about me choosing to leave after an argument. Mom gets defensive when she feels challenged. This isn't about feelings, Thomas. It's about actions. Illegal, harmful actions that hurt a child and could have been much worse." He nodded slowly. "What do you want Catalina to sue us, to drag the family through court?" "I want what the letter requests. Return of our belongings, return of the rent money, and acknowledgement of what really happened. That's it." Thomas studied me for a moment. "You've changed." Yes, I agreed. I have. After he left, I received a text from Valerie, the first contact from her since our eviction. "How's Lily doing? Is she feeling better?" As if we'd simply been away on vacation. I responded with simple facts. She had a fever for 3 days after being left in the rain. She's having nightmares and anxiety. She misses her grandfather and her things. No response came, but I hadn't expected one. The family was beginning to realize that their actions had real consequences, not just for me, but for an innocent child they claimed to love. That evening brought unexpected news. The apartment manager from one of the complexes I'd applied to called to tell me a unit had unexpectedly become available. "It's a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor," she explained. "Not fancy, but clean and well-maintained. The family that was supposed to move in had a job change, so it's available immediately if you're interested." The rent was at the upper end of my budget, but with the money from the Employee Assistance Program and the restructured bank accounts, it was manageable. I scheduled a viewing for the following morning. The apartment was exactly as described. Simple but clean, with neutral walls and decent appliances. There was even a small balcony where Lily could grow the plants she loved. Most importantly, it was in the same school district, allowing her to maintain that critical stability. "We'll take it," I told the manager after the tour. "Great," she smiled. "Now we just need the security deposit and first month's rent to hold it." My heart sank. Despite all my efforts, I was still short the full amount needed. Is there any way I could pay half now and half on my next payday? She looked sympathetic but shook her head. "I'm sorry, it's company policy. We need the full amount to take the unit off the market." As I drove away trying to figure out where to find the additional money, my phone rang. It was Miss Rivera from Lily's school. "Catalina, I have some news. I shared your situation with our parent association, keeping details private, of course, and they want to help. There's a foundation connected to the school that provides emergency assistance to families in transition. They've approved a grant to cover your security deposit. I pulled the car over, overcome with emotion. Are you serious? Absolutely. They were particularly moved by how Lily has been handling everything with such resilience. The check can be ready tomorrow. With the apartment secured, I felt a surge of hope stronger than anything I'd experienced in weeks. We had a home. A real home that was ours alone, where no one could lock us out or control our lives. The final piece fell into place later that day when my mother finally responded to the legal letter with a terse message. You can come get your things on Saturday between 9 and 4. Everything will be accessible. When Saturday came, I brought Sophia and Angela with me for both practical and moral support. I half expected my mother to have changed her mind, but when we arrived, the garage door was open with all our belongings sorted into sections. My mother watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable as we loaded furniture, clothes, and personal items into Sophia's truck and Angela's SUV. My father came out briefly, hugging Lily tightly when she ran to him, but retreated quickly when my mother called his name sharply. As we worked, I noticed something strange. Many items I hadn't thought important were meticulously organized, while several valuable things were conspicuously missing. My jewelry box, which contained my grandmother's ring, the small antique desk that had been mine since childhood, Lily's collection of science awards. Where's the rest? I asked my mother directly. This is everything, she replied. No, it isn't. There are specific things missing. She shrugged. If it's not here, we must not have found it. I was about to argue when my father appeared again, shuffling toward me with a large envelope. He pressed it into my hands, whispering, For you and Lily, I'm sorry. Inside, I found $500 in cash and a handwritten note. This isn't right. I'm trying to make her understand. The missing things are in the basement behind the water heater. Go when she's not looking. While my mother was distracted by a phone call, I slipped down to the basement with Sophia and found everything exactly where my father had indicated. As we carried the items out, I caught my mother watching from an upstairs window, her expression darkening when she realized what we'd found. The most startling discovery came as we were finishing. While gathering the last of Lily's school materials, I found a printed email that had fallen between some books. It was a confirmation of an apartment application I had submitted weeks earlier, forwarded from my personal email to my mother's account. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She had been monitoring my emails, watching my apartment hunting progress, tracking my plans to move out. That's how she had known to tell everyone I was planning to leave. She had invaded my privacy, gathered information, and used it against me. As we prepared to leave with the last of our possessions, I approached my mother one final time. I found the email, I said quietly. I know you've been reading my private correspondence. For the first time, she looked genuinely caught off guard. I don't know what you're talking about. You forwarded my apartment application email to yourself. That's how you knew I was looking for places. I was just trying to help, she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. No, you were controlling and manipulating as always. But it's over now. We're free of this toxic environment, and Lily will grow up understanding that love doesn't come with strings attached. As we drove away, Lily asked from the back seat, Are we going to our new home now, Mom? Yes, sweetheart, I replied, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. We're going to our real home. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt not just determined, but genuinely hopeful. We had faced the worst and survived. More than survived. We had found strength neither of us knew we possessed. 6 months have passed since that rainy day, when our lives were upended by my family's betrayal. Sitting on our small balcony watching Lily tend to her herb garden, I'm struck by how much has changed and how much stronger we've both become. Our apartment has transformed from an empty space to a true home that reflects who we are. The walls that were once bare now display Lily's artwork and photos of our favorite memories together. The furniture, some new and some reclaimed from my parents' house, is arranged to create cozy conversation areas rather than my mother's formal, untouchable rooms. Lily has flourished in ways I couldn't have predicted. After the initial anxiety and nightmares subsided, she developed a newfound resilience and confidence. Her grades, which had suffered during our period of instability, are now higher than ever. Last month, she won first place in the school science fair with a project on environmental adaptation, a fitting metaphor for our own experience. My professional life has stabilized as well. 3 months ago, I received a promotion to senior nurse in the pediatric unit, with a corresponding increase in salary that has eased our financial pressure considerably. Jane, my supervisor, cited my extraordinary grace under pressure as one of the reasons for the promotion. "You never let your personal challenges affect your care for the children," she told me. "That's the mark of a truly dedicated nurse." The boundaries I've established with my family remain firm but are evolving in necessary ways. My father's condition has worsened and I couldn't bear to cut him off completely. We now have a routine where I take Lily to visit him twice a month, but always in public places, like the park or a restaurant, never at my parents' house. My mother has made several half-hearted attempts at reconciliation, each lacking any real acknowledgement of her actions or their impact. The most revealing was a birthday card she sent Lily, which included the line, "I hope you understand that sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions for the good of everyone." I returned the card with a simple note. "When you're ready to take responsibility for what you did, we can talk about rebuilding trust. Until then, please respect our boundaries." Thomas and Valerie have taken different paths in the aftermath. Thomas, to my surprise, reached out with a genuine apology 3 months after the incident. "I got caught up in Mom's perspective, without questioning it," he admitted during a coffee meeting. "Seeing how it affected Lily made me realize we crossed a line that should never be crossed. While we're not close, we've established a cordial relationship that allows Lily to maintain connections with her cousins." Valerie, on the other hand, remains firmly in my mother's camp, occasionally sending passive-aggressive messages disguised as concern. "Just checking if you and Lily have enough food this month. I know things must be tight. I've learned to respond factually or not at all." The most profound changes, however, have been internal. I've discovered a strength and independence I never knew I possessed. The woman who once avoided conflict and sought approval at all costs has been replaced by someone who stands firmly in her own truth, who advocates for herself and her child without apology. Therapy has been instrumental in this transformation. Both Lily and I continue to work with counselors who help us process the trauma and build healthier patterns. I've gained insight into the generational cycles of control and emotional manipulation that shaped my childhood, and I'm determined that those cycles stop with me. "You know what I like best about our new home?" Mom, Lily asked recently as we walked home from school. "What's that, sweetheart?" "Nobody can lock us out of here. It's really ours." Her simple observation brought tears to my eyes. At 10 years old, she had articulated exactly what made our modest apartment more valuable than my parents' larger, more luxurious house. Security, autonomy, peace. Last week, I received an unexpected letter from my father's doctor, informing me that he had updated his medical directive to name me as his healthcare proxy instead of my mother. It was a silent vote of confidence that touched me deeply, a recognition that despite everything he trusts, my judgment and heart. My mother's reaction relayed by Thomas was predictably furious. But for once her anger couldn't reach me. I've built a life where her approval is no longer the currency I trade in. My worth is not determined by her acceptance or rejection. As I watch Lily chatting with our elderly neighbor who has become a surrogate grandmother figure, I realize that we haven't just survived a crisis. We've created something beautiful from it. A home built on mutual respect and unconditional love. A family that might be small in numbers, but is rich in authenticity. The betrayal that once felt like an ending has become a beginning. A painful but necessary severing of unhealthy bonds that allowed new, healthier connections to form. We've learned that family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by how people treat each other when it matters most. "Mom, come look. My basil is finally growing," Lily calls excitedly from the balcony. As I join her to admire the tiny green shoots pushing up through the soil, I'm struck by the perfect metaphor they provide. Growth often requires breaking through hard surfaces. It requires courage and persistence. But with the right conditions, with nurturing and patience, something new and vibrant emerges. That's what we've done, my daughter and I. We've pushed through the hardened soil of betrayal and emerged stronger, more vibrant, more authentically ourselves. And for that, despite all the pain that preceded it, I am profoundly grateful. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal by someone you trusted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. How did you find the strength to move forward? What lessons did you learn along the way? Please subscribe to my channel if this story resonated with you, and share it with anyone who might be struggling to find their own strength after betrayal. Remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by the courage and dignity with which you face life's challenges. Thank you for listening, and may you find peace and security in your own journey.